The cold was not merely a temperature. It was a geological weight, a crushing, colorless pressure that sought to turn blood into ice and men into statues. It did not bite, it consumed. It had a sound, a high-pitched crystalline ping that echoed through the boy's chalk whenever a tree limb, frozen to its core, finally snapped under the burden of the snow. For a technician, 5th grade Eugene Doc Roe, the cold was the primary enemy. More relentless than the German artillery, more insidious than the snipers. The Germans could miss, the cold never did. It was December 21st, 1944. Bastogne, the Siege Roe, moved through the fog like a wraith, his boots wrapped in burlap sacks to muffle the crunch of the frozen crust. And gray, his helmet slightly askew, his eyes dark and sunken, burning with a frantic, sleepless intensity. His normal was a perpetual inventory of scarcity. He counted things as he walked, a rosary of survival whispered under his breath. 3. Morphine syrettes. 2 battle dressings. 1 tourniquet. No plasma. No plasma. No plasma. The air smelled of pine resin, wet wool, and the metallic, coppery temps of old blood that refused to rot in the freezing air. Around him, the 101st Airborne Division was dug. Huddled in foxholes that were little more than graves waiting for occupants. The silence of the forest was deceptive. It wasn't peace. It was the hush that follows an air raid, a vacuum of sound created by the heavy fog that swallowed the noise of the world. Men spoke in whispers, if they spoke at all. Mostly, they just shivered, a collective vibration that hummed through the frozen ground. Roe slid into a foxhole occupied by 2 men from Easy Company, Heffron and Spina. They didn't look up. They were huddled together under a shelter half, trying to share body warmth, their breath pluming in thick white clouds. "You've got any scissors?" Roe asked, his voice soft, a Cajun lilt buried under layers of exhaustion. "Any bandages? Anything you ain't using?" Heffron looked up, his face a mask of grime and stubble, his eyes rimmed with red. "Doc, Jesus, you came out of nowhere." He fumbled in his webbing. "I got a field dressing. That's it. You take it." He tucked it into his aid bag, a bottomless pit that was always empty. "Keep your feet dry, Joe. Massage 'em. Don't let the blood stop. It's hard to keep 'em dry when you're living." "In an ice cube, Doc," Spina muttered, shivering. Roe didn't answer. He was the machinery of survival, a lone piston firing in an engine that had run out of oil. He moved from hole to hole, checking for trench foot, checking for fever, checking for the will to live. He touched foreheads with the back of his hand, not just to check for temperature, but to make sure the men were still warm, still human. The chaotic normal of the siege was a slow-motion strangulation. They were surrounded. The Germans held the roads, the hills, and the air. Supplies had been cut off for days, turning the forest into a slaughterhouse. But the real killer was the lack of supplies. A man hit in the gut needed plasma to keep his pressure up. A man with a shattered leg needed morphine to stop the shock. Roe had neither. He was a carpenter without wood, trying to build a house. Out of snow, he made his way back to the makeshift aid station, a depression in the ground covered by logs and dirt, located 100 yards behind the main line. Inside, it was dark and smelled of gangrene and unwashed bodies. Their eyes following Roe as he entered. Captain Winters was there, talking in low tones to the battalion surgeon. Winters looked haggard, his usually crisp uniform stained with mud. "We need to evacuate the..." "Critical, sir," the surgeon was saying, wiping his glasses. "Smithson won't last another night without surgery. He's internal. I can't fix him here." "We can't move them, Doc," Winters replied, his voice steady but strained. "The roads are cut. The Germans have armor on the Foy Highway. We're boxed in." Roe knelt beside Smithson, checking the boy's pulse. It was thready, a flutter against his fingertips. Smithson was pale, his skin the color of the snow outside. He needed plasma. He needed a miracle. "Any word on the drop?" Roe asked, not looking up. Winters sighed. "Fog's too thick. C-47s can't see the drop zones. We have to wait for the weather to break." Waiting. That was the war. Waiting to freeze. Waiting to die. Waiting for the sky to open. Then came the disturbance. It arrived in the form of a runner from regiment. A kid named Henderson who stumbled into the aid station, gasping for air, his face flushed with excitement. He was clutching a message slip, protecting it from the damp with his body. "Captain, message from regiment." They got a signal through. Henderson wheezed. Winters took the paper, angling it toward the dim light of the kerosene lantern. Roe watched him read it. He saw the captain's shoulders relax just a fraction. He saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. "It's a confirm," Winters said, looking at the surgeon and Roe. Codename Red Ball. A Gliderman resupply convoy broke through the southern perimeter at 0400 hours. They pushed through the German lines near Assenois. They're reporting arrival at the division supply dump in Bastogne. They're carrying medical priority. Plasma, penicillin, blankets. Roe felt a jolt in his chest. Plasma. It was the most beautiful word in the language. "Are they bringing it up to the line?" the surgeon asked. "No," Winters said. "They can't risk the trucks on the logging roads. It's too exposed. We have to send a jeep to the rendezvous point to pick up our allocation. Checkpoint Charlie 1, to crossroads near the rail line." "I'll go," Roe said immediately. He stood up, grabbing his helmet. "I'll go with the jeep. It's risky, Doc." Winters warned, "That road is under interdiction fire. Smithson needs the juice." "Sir, I'll go." 10 minutes later, Roe was sitting in the passenger seat of a jeep. A red cross painted on the hood that was barely visible under the grime. The driver, a private named Cobb, drove with his lights off, navigating by the gray light of the snow. And the memory of the road. The jeep rattled and slid on the ice, the chains on the tires clanking a rhythmic, metallic beat. They drove in silence, leaving the safety of the Foxholes behind. The woods opened up, revealing the white expanse of the fields. To the east, the horizon was glowing. A deep, pulsing crimson light that flickered against the low clouds. "Sun's coming up," Cobb grunted, wrestling the steering wheel. Roe watched the light. It was angry, violent. "That ain't the sun, Cobb. That's Bastogne burning." He watched the horizon burning red and thought it was dawn till he realized the sun was still hours away. The town was being pounded by German incendiaries. The safe rear area was an inferno. They reached checkpoint Charlie 1 20 minutes later. It was a desolate crossroads, marked by a shattered farmhouse and a burnt-out German half-track. This was the rendezvous. This was where the Red Ball convoy, the Saviors, were supposed to be offloading the supplies. It was empty. The wind howled across the open field, whipping snow into Roe's face. There were no trucks, no boxes, no activity. Just the silence of the winter and the distant thump-thump of artillery. "Maybe they're late," Cobb suggested, killing the engine to listen. Roe stepped out of the jeep. He walked to the center of the crossroads. He looked for tire tracks. The snow was pristine, unbroken. No heavy trucks had passed this way in days. "They ain't late," Roe whispered. He saw something flutter on a fence post near the ruined farmhouse. A piece of communication wire, likely used by a forward observer. He followed it with his eyes. It led into the darkness of the tree line on the German side of the road, and then he saw it 50 yards down the road. Hidden in a ditch was a jeep, an American jeep. It was overturned, riddled with bullet holes, covered in fresh snow. Roe ran to it, crouching low. He looked inside. The driver was dead, frozen solid. A radio operator was slumped in the back, the handset still clutched in his hand. Roe pulled the handset free. He looked at the radio settings. It was tuned to the regiment frequency. He realized the truth with a sickening physical vertigo. The message, the red ball breakthrough, the confirmation of supplies. The rendezvous hadn't come from an American convoy. It had come from here. From this dead jeep. The Germans had ambushed this jeep hours ago. They had taken the codes. They had sent the false arrival message to draw American vehicles out of their defensive perimeter, to lure them onto the open roads for target practice. Or worse, to give them false hope, to make them hold on for supplies that didn't exist, keeping them passive while the noose tightened. The precise, factual disturbance, the coded confirmation of the convoy, was a lie, a digital ghost. There was no plasma in Bastogne. There were no trucks. There was just the enemy, listening in the dark, playing with them. Doc Cobb hissed from the road. Movement, trees. Roe looked up. Shadows were detaching themselves from the forest edge. White capes. The distinct silhouette of the STAHLHELM. It was a trap, Roe didn't think. He reacted. He grabbed the dead radio operator's sidearm, a .45 automatic, and scrambled back toward Cobb. "Go, Cobb! Turn it around! Go!" The first shot cracked the air, whining off the Jeep's fender. Then the machine guns opened up, the MG-42s tearing through the silence with a sound like ripping canvas.